Roll call, please. Chris.
Kathy Slight, Berkeley Hills. Walter White, Berkeley Hills is excused. Howard Post, Kenema. Paul Egger, Kenema.
Here.
Larry Hanlon, Caulfield.
Here.
Rachel Gunderson, Chamber of Commerce is excused. Terry Campbell, Gaffney Lane. Kathy Hogan, Hazel Grove.
Here.
Tom O'Brien, Hazel Grove.
Here.
Steve Anderson, Hillendale.
Here.
Ray Gordon is excused. William Gifford, Hillendale.
Here.
Michael Berman, Main Street.
Here.
Bill Daniels, McLaughlin. Alice Watts, McLaughlin.
Here.
Nancy Kreschauer, Public Works. Here. Tom Guile, Park Place.
Here.
Steve Van Haverbeek, Park Place.
Here.
Bruce Danielson, Rivercrest. Patty Brown, Rivercrest. Inga Rickenbach, South End.
Here.
David Rickenbach, South End.
Here.
Steve Tam, Tower Vista. Scott Young, Tower Vista.
Here.
That completes the roll call.
Okay. Never having asked this before, and there seems to be a lot of absentees tonight. If we needed to vote on something, do we even have a quorum, do you suppose? Do we? Okay. Again, my name's Tom Guile. I'm the chair of the CIC. We have quite a bit of information presentations to make tonight, plus our round table and our own CIC business. So it's going to take, last time we got out of here in record time, an hour and 5 minutes, I think it was. This time it's going to be a little bit longer, but hopefully we can keep to our schedule. Each one of the speakers has a certain amount of minutes for presentations and question and answers. So, and we usually let the speakers go first so they can go on with their business. So let's start immediately. And it's this presentation's 10 minutes with question and answers for 5 minutes. It's Building Common Ground, discussion on community civility and compassion. Maureen Cole.
Good evening, and thank you for putting me on your agenda. Did everybody pick up a copy of this in the back? Hand out. I can go get a couple more copies. Would that be good?
Here, I'll get it.
Thank you. So I'll try and make this really brief. I'm the library director, and
Sure.
I was looking through some of the numerous mail that I get all the time, email, just like you guys, and I noticed that a grant proposal came through, and this one really caught my eye. It is called Building Common Ground, Discussion of Community, Civility, and Compassion, and it's a collaboration between the American Library Association and the Fetzer Institute. And what it is a grant that would provide $2,500 for programs. And the programs would be either at the library or through the library. We would arrange them. And the goal of the grant is to engage the public in contemplation and discussion of the importance of community, civility, and compassion in their daily lives. And this grant requires that the library do this in conjunction with a partner. And when I heard community, I just immediately thought of you guys. I just thought of your goals of, reaching to all aspects of the community, working with local government, and I thought there would be a really good synergy between the two of us working together potentially on this. So what I have to do for this grant is get a partner, community partner that would share some of these goals, and come up with between 4 and 8 programs that we would hold next year between February and November. So we have a long time before we have to have the programs, but of course when you do a grant you have to have everything all put together well ahead of time because that's what they approve. And so because of that, I sat down with William and Larry and we kind of brainstormed some programs that we thought might meet the goals of the grant and meet the needs of our community and meet the requirements of the grant. And of course they have like a whole bunch of suggested programs that they want you to look at first. There's 3 areas where you have to choose one idea out of each of these 3 areas. And the areas are reflection, engagement, and action. And so you can see down at the bottom of the page is a list of 7 programs that, potential programs that we came up with in our brainstorming session. We feel like the community would benefit from a grant like this and programs like this because all communities will do better if they talk about how to overcome divergent opinions, how to reach consensus, how to be as productive as possible with the volunteer efforts that we have working with local government. And we want to build on work that's already been done in that area, such as some of the training that the city has provided through to its staff and to the city commission at the retreat, through the Glazers, the communication experts, and through the common ground work that some of the neighborhood associations have already started. And we just felt like applying for this grant and doing some of these programs would be a good extension of that work. So I'm coming to you tonight to find out if you would like to be my community partner in this. And what that would require is really just your support. It would not require any funding or anything like that. On the very back of this page says what it would require, and basically I would need a letter of support detailing what you would do, and that's mostly like helping me identify and provide access to speakers, maybe create some service opportunities, and I listed one of the service opportunities that you guys are thinking about as potentially something we could piggyback on. Help me with outreach. You know, since you guys reach out to all of the neighborhoods and you have that communication already in place, that would be a really great way to get the word out to people about programs. And if you wanted to provide supplemental funding, that would be great, but that's not required. I figure everything that we could have already come up with would be well covered by the $2,500 in the proposal. So that is what I'm here for tonight. Any questions? Or anything that you guys want to add from our conversation?
In the past, either if you don't have access to your screen, just raise your card if you'd like to make a comment. Those who got cards. Comments from anybody? Oh, back there, I'm sorry.
Are there other organizations
I was gonna-
that you also consider?
Well, we brainstorm like a lot of organizations, like the schools and stuff like that, but I have to put this together pretty quickly. So one other organization that I targeted that might be able to provide one of the programs was the Three Rivers Artists Guild, just because I'm going to ask Ingrid if she could organize a photo exhibit, because that's one of the programs that would fit into the ones that they suggested. So I mean, we could add a whole bunch of people later, but when I submit my proposal, I have to have at least one community partner.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, I will in a minute.
Chair?
Yes, Paul.
I move that we proceed and give our acceptance to this plan, and to put forward a letter that will help or show our support for this.
Second?
Was that a...
He said he moved.
Okay. Do we take the vote now or a discussion? I forgot that. Any discussion on that? Yes, Tom.
Yes, I'm a little concerned over the list of 7 items that I see here, Mo. And I see Steve back there, and I know we've been trying to get the National Night Out more focused on involving the entire community. I really look at some other things besides what's here as being stronger focal points for building common ground and community. If this is approved tonight to sign on to this, who all is going to be involved in setting targets or goals on things that should be part of it?
Well,
You mean the potential programs, like you mentioned?
yeah,
Programs.
potential
Yeah,
programs.
I see programs that may be far more beneficial to the citizens than, some individual small community things.
Right. I would be happy to get your input on that. I just, this is just a draft list that we came up with in a brainstorming session. The problem is that the grant needs to be submitted on November 18th, so we don't have a whole bunch of time to develop this stuff because when I send it in, I'm supposed to have like a date and speakers and whatever else already figured out. So if you want to, I would be happy to sit down with whoever and kind of go through the scope of like the suggested things that they have and then some other ideas for people who know the community better than I do.
Have you had conversation with David Frazier relative to ideas or suggestions on what might be of better value?
Oh, not really. I mean, he's just said, go forth, sounds like a great idea, but not really specifics.
Okay. Thank you.
William?
My understanding is that the proposed items on this are preliminary items that are sort of a rough draft to give us a general idea of the types of activities that we could be involved in. I think Paul's motion and my second speaks to the issue that we can, at a minimum, write a letter of support of the general idea of this program, because I understand that time is a bit of an essence, as it usually is with grant processes, and so I would like to get moving on that and certainly have all the rest of us involved in these later programming fine-tunings, but I'd like to call the question on this.
Can I make a comment before we do?
Not after I call the question.
Gee, thanks a lot. What was your question? Okay, let's take a vote. That didn't give me a chance to even make a comment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Aye.
Okay, passed. From now on, I'm going to beat you to the punch and get my name on there first. Yes. Well, usually our secretary puts together a letter because he's so handy with prose. One thing I failed to do before we started was to, it's common courtesy for us up here to introduce those in the audience, or at least identify themselves if they're here with a neighborhood or with another speaking part, or just if they're just visitors tonight. So we failed to do that, so can we start with Tony?
Tony Conkle, Community Development Director.
Congratulations. Okay.
I'm Pete Walter. I'm planner in the planning department.
Steve Anderson, co-chair, Hillendale.
Scott Young, co-chair of Tower Vista.
Irene Darling, secretary of Tower Vista.
Welcome.
Terry Instead, I'm just here.
Visiting. Okay.
What neighborhood?
Main Street.
Kenema.
Oh, Kanema, okay.
Yes, sir.
Michael Bushke, asset management specialist for Public Works.
Great.
And Troy Bowers with Murray Smith and Associates, co-presenting with John tonight on the 5-year pavement maintenance plan.
Okay.
Tyler Fogue, Kenema.
Okay.
Gabe Croft, also with Murray Smith and Associates, presenting with President John Lewis.
Okay. And the stranger up front. Okay, I think we've got everybody.
And may I ask, if you haven't signed in on the
mayor.
on the guest list, please do so.
Mayor stepped out.
He'll be back.
Okay, let's now that we've taken care of that, let's move on to the next one. Operation Santa. Beth Dudley, Clackamas Fire District Number 1. Presentation of 5 minutes and question and answers of 5 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, my glasses that I broke. Beth is not here for Operation Santa, so Chris is going to speak briefly on it.
Yes, Beth had a conflict this evening, but Operation Santa Claus with Clackamas Fire District Number 1 in Oregon City will be Saturday, December 3rd, and Sunday, December 4th. They will be leaving from Station 16, which is the Hilltop Station by the post office, and they will be leaving at 6 o'clock p.m. and returning about 9 o'clock. So if there's anyone...
Both nights?
Both nights, yes. Saturday evening, they will be up in the Holcomb neighborhood, and then part of Hilltop, and then on Sunday, the rest of Hilltop and out South End Way. So
And what do they do?
they will be collecting food and toys, and that will all, everything stays in the fire district, so it will stay in our area. So If anybody has any questions, I do have Beth's email address.
Okay.
So it's a great project. So 6 o'clock on Saturday.
And please get this information back out to your neighborhood associations and tell them that the kids love to, see the fire engines come into their own neighborhood and get involved in that way as well.
Yeah, with all the fires in my neighborhood, it makes us nervous.
Like curses.
Yeah, like curses. Next, in an effort to reach out to all the neighborhood associations, the city works, different departments like to make a presentation here before the CIC so those at home can hear about it. And I believe that you also make these same ones to this at the city council. Is that correct, or is it just to a CIC?
This is the first time we've made this presentation. We may make it to the City Commission if we can get on their agenda.
Okay, so you may see a repeat at the city council meetings. So, next up is a pavement maintenance utility 5-year plan. John Lewis, Public Works Manager, presentation of 25 minutes with question and answers of 10 minutes. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you for having us tonight. We really appreciate it. We've got this PowerPoint presentation, which I know you have your screens, but I'm wondering, could we get the lights dim just so that it might be a little better viewing from behind? We're also, this is informational, so we're not asking you for a decision tonight. We just want to provide you an update on a program that we've got going. And William, the frog thing, does that mean something to us? So
It's
that
a
we know?
timer.
Is that a timer
Whenever
that
that
we?
goes off,
Is that
it
our
means-
timer that we pay attention to? Okay.
It's to let me know that I'm supposed to say, you're cut off.
Okay. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure because I've heard it before.
Yes, at the landslide meeting.
So we
Frequently.
Talk fast, you'll hear it again.
Okay. So right now, what we're presenting is we've basically got a draft plan that's not quite published. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but we thought it would be good to bring it to you because of the timing of your meeting, and it looked like we could get on your agenda. So we appreciate that very much. The biggest piece that really is missing from our plan, we're still working on the preventative maintenance portion of this work, and you'll learn more about the difference between preventative maintenance and reconstruction work in the presentation. But keep in mind this is a draft plan. You don't have it in the materials that you have, but it will be available very shortly. So the intent of that would be to provide you, it'll have all the maps in it and all the considerations that we're going to present to you tonight. But it's still draft, so we're a little premature, but we're happy to be here. So this is this 5-year pavement maintenance plan. It's a flexible plan. It's not this report isn't about our annual maintenance report because we do that as well. So this is really a 5-year look ahead as to what we would like to do in the next 5 years. So tonight we're going to talk to you about our efforts to use the information that we know today in building our street maintenance program for the future. We're going to show you some of our recommendations. Again, we're not asking you for any decisions, but we're going to show you as much as we can. There's the graphics, because they're citywide, we've plotted them, and they're hanging on the wall, and they're out in the lobby. We'll leave them here. I know not too many of you got a chance to look at those, but they're important maps, so we want you to take a look at those. So, in 2008, May 21st, 2008, the City Commission approved Ordinance Number 08-1007, establishing the pavement maintenance utility fee, or William, as you correctly pointed out, it used to be the transportation utility maintenance fee. We've renamed it, and we love the new name. So, prior to 2008, the city used city gas taxes to fund street maintenance and some road transfer funding. We've had very little funding for capital improvements in 2008. And it was clear to the City Commission, I think it was clear to the community that we needed transportation funding. In fact, they asked the Public Works Department and a citizen committee to come up with the appropriate way to fund street maintenance. And so out of that came this ordinance, and they passed that. We started that effort in 2007. We have 138 miles of streets. I mean, it was obvious we needed to be we needed more funding for the maintenance liability that we had. So in 2008, the fee started at $4, and for residential, it started at $4.50 per single-family home. So you all pay that. And that first year, we collected about $600,000. 2011, the fee's $9 a month, and we're nearly $1.5 million in revenue. The three maps that I mentioned, the first one that I know you cannot see, but there's a map over there that we're pretty proud of. It represents what we've done with that funding over the last 3 years, or since 2008. We've completed a lot of projects that you might remember: Warner Milne Road, Warner Parrott Road, South End. We've done work in the Caulfield neighborhood. We've done work in every neighborhood, actually. So take a look at that map in case you've forgotten kind of some of those projects. People don't focus on them nearly as much as we do. Take a look at those maps just to kind of see how well I think we've done. We've done a good job of trying to spread that around the city to the best of our ability. We want to talk to you a little bit about our pavement management program. We use a software called Street Saver. It's really a holding place for where we keep our inspection data. We inspect our streets every 3 years, and we utilize that system annually to kind of figure out maybe what we should be doing. And we've really used it in this process to try to it's really a high-level planning tool. So we've taken it quite a bit further than what the software has the ability of doing. But it still is a great place to document the work that we've done and to just kind of look closely at numbers and what kind of budget scenarios we might have and how those scenarios might play out if we try different funding scenarios or if we do different kinds of work, how that might affect the overall rating of the system. So Street Saver is key, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we also have an in-house paving program, in-house being that it's not contracted work, it's not developer-driven work, it's the work that our own crews do, and I think it's really gotten fairly robust in that we've borrowed equipment, we've expanded our ability to pave, our crews gotten much better at paving than they were maybe even 3 years ago. This last year, we borrowed a milling machine from the city of Gresham, a larger roller from the city of Portland, and we did some exchange there with those agencies to kind of make that work and hopefully work in years to the future. So we think we're doing a lot better job with those smaller patches that are still very important and don't always get well reflected in our pavement management program because we can't map every little place where we go, or we could, but we don't. So one of the challenges that we face as we started those first 3 years, we had a commitment map that we presented when we first had the fee. I don't know if some of you may remember that, but we've done a good job of trying to meet that commitment. We've found there's been projects that have been more challenging because they're not necessarily the low-hanging fruit. They're not all low-hanging fruit projects in that we had utility problems to deal with and maybe not a utility project identified for that project. So Division Street's a good example of that, where we had intended to pave more of Division Street. We did pave a few blocks of Division Street, but the piece that everybody uses regularly, which is really between the hospital and Malala Avenue, is the piece that needs it the most. And that's one section that we realized, wow, that's a much bigger project, and there's some utility needs there that we just can't afford to fund right now. So that's one of those projects that were on the commitment list that we didn't take on. But all in all, I think we've done an outstanding job trying to meet the commitments and spread those dollars as far as we can. So, unfortunately, as I said, these maps are small, but I want to acknowledge this map here, and it's the middle map on the wall here. This is really where we're coming to this with this plan. We have been able to take a very large list of pavement needs and narrow that list to something that we can afford to pay for. And we think it's work that is high on that priority list. It's spread around the city, It's definitely those streets that we think if we don't deal with soon, we're going to lose and have to spend a lot more money on later. So unfortunately, the map in this view isn't very viewable. But again, I encourage you to look at the map at the back. I would say, while it's a map and it's in ink, it's still flexible. We still see it as a guide and something that we would like to attain, but we want to be flexible as well.
Thanks for color coding the neighborhood associations.
Yeah, we think that works well. I guess, mentioning that, William, that's one of those factors that isn't in our pavement management software. It doesn't factor in neighborhoods necessarily. So we've tried to do a good job with moving that work around where the needs are, but also kind of sharing it with everybody, because we know everybody uses or everybody pays that fee. So that's another criteria that we've since kind of included in the work that MSA has done for us. Which, by the way, I didn't do a great job of introducing Gabe and Troy, but many of you may know Murray Smith from years past. They've done a lot of water work for us. They've done a lot of wastewater work for us. Now they're doing transportation work for us. So they've got a lot of experience under their belt, and they've done an outstanding job helping us to gather this information, manipulate this information in a way that makes some sense, and keep us on task. I mean, in particular, with reviewing notes, having meetings, checking our cost information. They've looked at our treatment types to make sure that the unit costs that we're using for theirs kind of match the industry standard. They've helped us realize that we do have some special projects out there that might be a little bit more than just pavement maintenance. And there's three of them on here. Division Street's one of them, Malala's another, and Pearl Street is another project. And those three stand out as kind of special projects that, while we have funding in this plan for some pavement maintenance, if you will, there's more to those projects than really just pavement needs. So that's why we feel like those are special projects. We're also working with Murray Smith to come up with a pavement moratorium, so that after we go in and repair these streets, we will have we hopefully will get commission support on a pavement moratorium, so that if somebody needs to get into that street or cut into that street with the utility project, we've got maybe a little stronger hand with what that repair might look like, or maybe we'll prevent them from doing it at all. So I guess the other thing I wanted to say was the far map, furthest map over there, if you is what we call unconstrained scenario. The funding is unconstrained in that particular scenario. So you just give the program the ability to run and tell you what the needs are for that particular. What are our needs, and if we wanted to get our pavements within the city up to a very high standard in a short amount of time, how would we spend that money, and how much would it cost? And those numbers are a little bit kind of sometimes hard to imagine, but for that particular run, for the first 5 years of what it recommends, we saw a payment need of about $32 million. And we have about 7.4 if based on the projected payment utility fee. So that's why it's been such a challenge to kind of narrow that search to get to a list that's both acceptable, makes sense with all our utility needs, and makes sense with where we know that if we don't do something with those streets, we're going to lose them. So, and we've allocated some to, quote, the preventative maintenance piece, which we're still working to finalize, and then the majority of the money goes into, we think, out of the $1.5 million that we are going to collect this year, we're going to spend about $200,000 on preventative maintenance. That's the slurry seals, the chip seals, those kind of things. And the remainder would go towards reconstruction or overlays. So definitely not enough money to cover our needs, but still much more than we would have had if we had not had the PMUF. So let's see, that's slide 4. I got one more to talk about, don't I?
We did discuss this.
I think I skipped. I covered this one a little bit. MSA has been very helpful and innovative in their thoughts on how we prioritize this work. Like I said, they've been able to keep the project moving. I think most of these items I covered already, so I won't do it again. It provided some outstanding maps too, by the way, so I hope you enjoy those. So Gabe, I'm going to turn it over to Gabe for the next few slides.
Okay, thanks, John. So my name is Gabe Kropp with Murray Smith & Associates. We've been, as John said, working together with the city to help usher along this pavement maintenance plan. And we've been doing a number of things to help the city out. As a way to kind of lead into what we've been doing with the city, I thought I'd help make sure everybody kind of is on the same page in terms of what everybody understands pavement maintenance to be. John already kind of hit on this, but one aspect of pavement maintenance is the preventative side. And this slide shows many of the preventative maintenance methods or techniques that one could use. So the city does a lot of slurry sealing and crack sealing and some spot repairs and not so much microsurfacing, but these are the types of low-cost repair methods that can be applied to a pavement, usually early in its life cycle. So usually within the first 5 years or so after it's been put down is the best time, ideally, to put these down, although they can be put down later in the process also. So this is where I think the city would like to be, is in a position to apply most of these techniques as compared to the more expensive ones, which are the pavement rehabilitation methods, which is on the next slide, John. This is a quick graphic showing what, in a nutshell, what pavement rehabilitation is. It's more of a structural fix. It's your overlays, your grind and inlays, your full depth reconstruction. This is the higher cost type of work that is really the heart of what we ended up helping the city with. Because most of the budget goes to the rehabilitation, that was what the city asked for our help in figuring out the best way to spend those dollars. This is a graph, some of you may have seen it before, or something similar to it. What it's meant to show is what happens to pavement over time. As you can see, pavement condition, as you would expect, degrades over time, and there's different ways that you can treat the pavement. One of the ways is through your preventative maintenance, and so one of those is shown there at the 5-year mark. You can kind of see where it says $2 for PP here. That's preventative pavement preservation work. So that's the slurry seals, the crack sealing, and it doesn't increase the condition much of the pavement, but what it does is it really lengthens the life of it, and that's where you get the value out of those techniques. As compared to if you wait longer, typically in the life cycle of a pavement, if you wait to do the more reactive maintenance, the overlays, the grind and inlays, and even the full depth reconstruction, you're going to spend a lot more money to get it back up to where it was before. And then also, it's not as cost effective ideally, but sometimes that's what you're left with an aging system. Next slide there. So what we've done with the city is try to help guide the planning process for where the city would like to go in terms of allocating their funds for the next 5 years. Done a great job of getting that low-hanging fruit, as John said, up to this point, getting the projects that the city knows need to be done. So for the future, what we did is we initially started with the pavement management software the city uses called Street Saver. We were able to leverage that software to kind of develop an initial project list, and that list is visualized in the second figure there on the wall. And that's actually the current recommended list. It's not the one that Street Saver initially gives us, but it's the one that we arrived at the end of the process. Once we got that initial project list out of Street Saver, we applied more criteria to it. John mentioned like the neighborhood equity piece. That would be one criteria. There are several others. Then we also worked with utilities at the city to try to make sure we were synchronizing the utility needs as much as possible with the pavement needs. We also did a bunch of cost analysis throughout the process, and I'll describe a little bit more how we made sure to make make sure we ended up with a list that was really doable with the funds that the city has available, and ultimately make recommendations for what projects should be pursued in the future. So the first step, and I'll try to keep this brief and not too technical, but the software that the city uses has a lot of capabilities. It uses a lot of information. It uses the known condition of the streets, along with a lot of other criteria like street classification and known treatment types that can be applied to those streets. You can tell it that you have this much budget in this much time period, and then it'll spit out a file of projects that will basically, the program says, this is what you should think about doing. And that's great, and that's what we started with. We used this as a starting point, and we met with the city to talk about, well, what else can we do to make this list better? And we talked about what that additional criteria should be. Some of those items listed on your slides there. We looked at future work. There's other work we know that's going on in the city. There's the Rivers Project. There's the Jug Handle Project, I believe, down at Highway 213. So we want to make sure we weren't duplicating efforts. We weren't doing work that was overlapping with this other future work. So that was one criteria. We looked at where bus routes were at and where additional traffic loading was happening because of those bus routes, and making sure those are keeping functional. We wanted to make sure we were excluding any non-city roads that may have snuck in there, anything that may be maintained by the county. And then the real key here was getting in contact with the city Public Works staff on their institutional knowledge was just invaluable. They know where the potholes are at. They know where all the individual problem areas are at, and that was ultimately what really guided the selection of certain projects. And then we used a criteria. We used a scoring system to kind of to adjust the project list. Once we had the project list adjusted and updated, we met with city utility staff, water, wastewater, stormwater folks. They looked at our project list and they said, "Oh, we know we have these utility issues, on these streets that you're planning to pave." So that enabled us to coordinate any of that work for possibly combining them into one project, or where we weren't sure what the fix was going to be for those utilities in the future. We were able to document what those issues were, and that is going to be a key item for the city to use in the next 5 years as they scope these paving projects. They're able to go back and see what the utility issues are. Does that mean I have 4 minutes? Okay, great. I think we'll get there. We also did a bunch of cost analysis through the process. One of the first things we did, we evaluated the treatment type unit cost that StreetSaver was using to make sure that it was using industry standard costs, as they do tend to change over time. They both go up and down. And then we're always evaluating the needs of the city with respect to the actual budget to make sure we were working on a project list that was attainable. So John mentioned that the overall needs are certainly high if one wants to get to a street system that's rated very well, and in reality is there's only limited funds to be applied. So we really used the priorities that we developed in that second step as a cost analysis tool to make sure we were doing the projects that would get you the most effectiveness. And then, of course, we were trying to do our best to balance the projects on a year-to-year basis to sync up with the annual budget that's available, which is about the $1.5 million. And this slide is kind of a quick summary of what those costs are. The top table there is what the forecast revenues are for pavement maintenance. As you can see, it really is about $1.5 million. There was a slow ramp-up period from when the initial fee was established, and I think the city's just about there now, to the full amount. And then the bottom table is a summary of the recommended improvements for all the projects. And as you can see, it's not completely balanced, and that's somewhat intentional. The list is meant to be somewhat flexible. It's a balance of where the real needs are compared to the actual budget. And so this will be updated, I think, on a yearly basis by the city as they are able to complete projects. Then they're able to mark them off the list, and whatever isn't able to be done one year will carry over to the next, and you're able to have more money, or you get cheap bids, you're able to do more work earlier.
The other thing is we know that we're going to have some utility needs under some of these streets that might need some pavement. Some of them we'll be able to afford, some of them we won't. And our hope is as we move forward with some of our water utility. I know Nancy's working on the master plan update for that, so that's an important piece. But funding is, it's hard to build these street projects without taking into consideration the utilities. It's just we know better as public works officials, and we like to be able to do that. But so that's why that $9 million, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room, and I imagine we'll use it.
So where we got to with our recommendations is to make sure that the document that we're going to be submitting as the final planning document is really treated as a working project list. And I think that's what John was wanting to, is something that is intentionally flexible for him to work with over the years. The needs change, conditions change. There are still variables out there, or even over the course of 5 years, that need to be addressed. So that was one of our recommendations, is that the project list that's shown there in the second figure, it really is a working list. The list that's really more in a database that supports that figure also has suggested treatment types, and our recommendation is to make sure that we're still selecting the right treatment types when it comes time to do that project work, because conditions do change. So some areas may require a little bit more investigation to make sure the right treatment is applied. As far as utility projects go, there will be some ongoing coordination that needs to happen with city utilities. Some projects, like I said, could be combined if there's a known utility need. There's some flexibility to adjust the timeline for when certain paving is done. And it sounds like I'm about done.
Go ahead, you have a minute or so to wrap it up.
Yeah, in general, the PMUF seems to be doing its job. It seems like, from what Street Savers telling us, is that the pavement condition in the city should at least stay the same and hopefully increase a little bit over the next 5 years based on the current funding.
So we're open for questions.
It looks like William Gifford's on here.
Thanks very much for the presentation. And I've always been a believer that Public Works has been an exemplary use of public funds. So I'm pleased that you're able to do this with such great transparency. But before I ask my questions, that was just the kiss-up stuff. I want to remind the other neighborhood representatives, specifically Steve, Scott, and Howard, that even though you're sitting back there, you're certainly part of this group, and you're more than welcome to jump in at any time. So I had three questions. One is when we as a community were developing the PMUF concept, and we were talking about something called the PCI, the Pavement Condition Index, and 100% or 100 is perfect, brand new, and going on down. And it seemed as though we were striving for an average PCI, and I understand that the averages are variable because in a new development, of course, the roads are in much better condition than the older ones and so on. But there was an average that we were shooting for, and I don't remember what that is. And I didn't remember what it was at the time we began this, and I'd like to know what it is now.
So
that's question one.
Street Saver program strives for a PCI of 80.
80, okay.
The city has a PCI of 60.
That's the goal. Or
that's
current,
what we have.
Current situation.
Current
okay.
situation. We were about in that range when we passed I think we've stayed about the same, maybe lost a point. I mean, we definitely, when we went through the adoption of that, if you remember right, that we were recommending $1.5 million right off the get-go. And we decided that it made sense to ramp that up over time. Mm-hmm. So we didn't spend $1.5 million right off the bat. We spent more like $600,000, and then every year thereafter. So I think our PCI has stayed about where it's at. Even after this 5 years, I think we'll see some increase. But I think, William, we're really playing catch-up, and we're trying to defend streets that really have kind of outlived their life, but yet we're trying to apply treatment.
But it hasn't gone downhill anyway.
Hasn't gone downhill.
Well, that's
no.
positive.
And we think with this we will be able to stretch this, because what's not included in here is some of the in-house work that we do, and then some of the innovation that we might come up with throughout the next 5
And
years.
technology is going to change over the next few years, you expect. Everything else does. The second question I had was about an idea that I came up with when I was living down in Salem about why, is there an opportunity, maybe the commission could consider this, an opportunity for an individual citizen to contract, if they have a pothole right in front of their house and nobody else goes by there, hardly anybody else, but it bugs them so much that they would be willing, if the price, seemed reasonable, to fix that particular part regardless of the rest of the schedule. Get a private contractor, do whatever needs to be done to make sure, of course, it's up to speed and code. What do you think of that idea?
It's unique. It's a good idea. I think there's a big difference between, say, the street you live on or Malala or a boulevard like that.
Of course.
Sometimes we use off-the-shelf kind of repairs for those, pothole repairs. Let's say a cold mix that you can kind of stick in the hole and it fixes it, but it's not a long-term fix. Those things make sense. Something larger. We had one property owner who had an apartment complex at the end of an alleyway, and he approached the city about paving that alleyway, and it was paved at one time, and it just was. We knew it wasn't ever going to show up on the list, and we worked with him to allow him to pay for that. So I think as long as he's working with the Public Works Department, we can find solutions like that.
Of course, some compromise. And the last one that I had is that, I thank you, and not facetiously at all, about color-coding the thing by neighborhoods, because that's our perspectives, for the most part, is our neighborhoods. I mean, you didn't break it down by, and I know that the projects can't be coordinated by neighborhood anymore. They can be coordinated by voting precincts, I mean, that's got nothing to do with the reality of the fact that everybody uses them. But in reality, there are some roads that might seem more important to some people. Not that a public official would ever take advantage of that, but if you wanted the street in front of the mayor's house to look particularly nice, you might adjust priority. I know. And there you go. But trying to get to the question, if there was something such as Leland, which so severely needs something done with a sidewalk or a way for people to walk along the side of that, and it impacts a lot of people, what procedure could be done to increase the priority on a project?
Well, having just worked through Leland, I would say it's much better than it was.
Absolutely.
And we really struggled with that. Leland, first of all, wasn't on our commitment list, but it was one street that we got so many calls on, kind of like we're getting now with Division. We basically bumped Division and figured, because it was more complicated of a project, and went with the Leland project, which at the time we figured we'll do an overlay. But we took that further. We widened it a little. We added some curbs. We fixed a whole bunch of drainage problems there. We spread that.
Excuse me, that answers my question, is that the way you get it bumped up is to complain more.
Not exactly, William, but I think there's some merit to that. I mean, we've done, we tried, and that's part of our process here. That's why we're trying to, you can't develop a plan like this by a vote of the people, I don't think, or even a vote of this room. But we've tried as to look hard at what the community might want.
I think you've been very responsible.
So we're trying to cover that.
That answers my questions. Thanks very much.
Now that William's taken 6 of our 10 minutes for the question and answers, Tom.
I'll try to be brief. First,
There's the other 6.
I'd like to compliment John and his department and Troy and Gabe for the fine work that they've done. I had a question, but I also had a comment. I'm glad to see that we've got the funding. I'm very positive and feel that if it were possible, we should be looking for more. But in addition to that, I did have a somewhat irate person in my neighborhood come to me. He was about to go to a city commission meeting, and that's why he knocked on my door. He wanted to know when the next city commission meeting was. He had been analyzing his bills, and he noticed that doubling effect in a very brief, for him, period of time. He's on fixed income. And I said, back down, calm down, don't go to the commission. Here's what they're doing with it. And I pointed out the fact that you had earlier that year, about 3 months prior to his coming, done a slurry coat on his street. And he said, I wish they hadn't done it. It's been nothing but a problem since. I think we have a PR issue, to make things short. I think you need to go into the Trail News with a list of all of your great accomplishments since the very start of this program. People read the Trail News. They don't mind spending money if they see where it's going. And right now, if it's going in somebody else's neighborhood, they don't have an awareness that it's happening. So I think there's a communications issue, as there often is. I'm just curious myself, if you got time to answer it real briefly, microsurfacing, it's a term I'm not familiar with. What is it?
Sure, it's a lot like slurry sealing. It's a little bit more extensive of a product, and correct me if I'm wrong from your understanding of it, but it's got some more high-tech materials.
More epoxy type?
It's quick. It sets quicker, so we can do it on streets like Fir. We did it on Fir. That's the first street we've done it on, and it's a little more expensive, but it sets quickly, and it's got a little thicker gravel section to it. So
thank you.
It's supposed to last longer, but it's fairly new to the region.
I just have a quick question. I'm next on here. I've been reading the paper a lot about some complaints in the city of Portland. Some citizens are either suing or they're doing something about add-ons on their utility bill, water utility bills, and I know this is on our utility bill. Is that a similar situation? Is that what they're complaining about in Portland? Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you read it?
I do.
Nancy does.
And I'd be interested in that because I was reading that again this morning and going, well, we have add-ons on our utility bills too. Is that something irregular?
We don't really have add-ons. We have, when we increase water rates, they're approved by the city commission, or any kind of rate for that matter. And we didn't charge for pavement maintenance until it was adopted by ordinance by the city. But I think what you're referring to is utility funds being used for things other than, say, that particular utility. And I don't know anything about what's going on in Portland, but in Oregon City, all the money that we collect from your utility bill goes into the different categories. There's the water fund, there's the sewer fund, there's the storm sewer fund, and there's the pavement management fund. And the money in those funds is used exclusively for maintaining, operating, and repairing and constructing within those systems. So there's no adding in projects that wouldn't fit within that category.
So the difference is in Oregon City, rather than this being a water bill, it's a utility bill.
It's a
and
utility
it covers
bill.
these different pockets of.
Yes.
Because I know somebody was complaining in the Oregonian about something about building that water house that was all, done around that.
And
So
I
that
don't-
explains it.
I'm
the
not
utility
sure,
bill.
but all of our expenditures are very open, and it's in the budgeting process. You can see where it all goes, and we're really, really careful not to be using the funds for things they're not intended for.
Okay, that helps explain that. Kathy.
Oh, I had 3 questions. I call it a tax. I don't care
20
what,
seconds.
if you want to call it a fee, it's a tax. It's going to be perpetual, correct?
Sorry, Kathy.
I can't hear. The hearing aid's not here. And is it going to increase a lot more down the line? Because I'm thinking of low income, and is there a program for low income people? Okay. And
You want me to
then,
answer that one?
yeah, go ahead.
So right now, the fee is set to max at $11 a month. Do you remember?
that.
Yeah. So there's one more increase yet to come, and then as far as our projections, at least through this study, it stays there. Now there's also a requirement in when they adopted the ordinance that we at year 5 we look harder at that fee to see how it's playing out, whether it should be more or if it should be less, and so that's yet to come. It looks to me like we're making good use of these dollars, and I hope to say that that they'll stay stable. The rates will stay stable.
Well, I'm thinking of low income when they're on a very fixed income, that if there's a program that they should know about it.
There is is it called an exemption? Do you remember what it's?
There are some reductions for seniors and families that have a certain income level.
Okay.
They can apply through
If
the-
you, if I could for a second, I have the forms here for it, and what this does is, as an example, in the preventive maintenance utility fee, if you're low income and you qualify through a matrix that the city has authorized, and it's based upon the state poverty level, the preventive maintenance fee for low income drops from, as an example, this right at this period is $9. If your low income is $4.50. And so that's a significant savings to those that are truly achieving poverty in a poverty environment. So when it goes up to 1122, the maintenance fee goes to $525. And so these are really important types of opportunities for people, and I will talk to it a little later when it comes to the roundtable.
Well,
Nancy?
Okay, I'm not finished. I had two more. Well, 'cause
Well,
I'm
you
just
can
worried. Well, I'm just worried about people that are on fixed income and they have medications and things. Not that they would end up doing without, trying to keep within their home and paying the fees. Then the other two things is on doing the job. And I'm saying it's not bad because it is good. Are you getting the best bang for your buck for the product? And is it giving jobs to people within the community?
Well, we
Or
have
try to.
we have construction standards that are industry standards that we follow and we inspect and we abide by. What we've seen from other agencies with regard to some of these new processes, like the microseal, we're using the same product line, same methods, same means. So, and we're seeing these projects that have been, even before we had pavement and utility fee, we were doing some paving around town and slurry seal around town, and we're seeing good life out of those projects as well. The crack seal we do in-house, it's good work, all the work that we're doing in-house. So I forget the second part of your question.
That some of the jobs that go into people within the community are whoever does the project is within the community or close to the community, so that the jobs are, we
The
need
money
jobs.
circulates locally.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we advertise these projects in the local paper. The contractors, I don't know that we've seen one from Oregon City, but they're from the area. They're from the metro area, so they're not coming from California or other places to do these paving jobs. That's not to say that they don't do out-of-state work, but to the best of our ability, I'm not sure that we have any more control over that because we are kind of obligated through state law how we procure contracts.
Okay, Nancy?
Yeah, just to mention also, Kathy, that the projects are all competitively bid, so we get the low bid, and so that assures that we have a competitive price in terms of bang for the buck. Then I just wanted to reiterate what John said about the 5-year review is coming up, and that's something that will be engaging the community and then ultimately the City Commission in terms of how is the fee doing, and that's what I think that this project that was just completed is going to be really helpful for that, to be able to show, do we need more, do we need less, are we doing okay with what we have? I think that it's also always important to have some sort of an inflation factor or regular rate increase because costs do go up. And so that kind of a cost increase you might see, and I would say that's important so that we can stay on top of the deferred maintenance of all of our utilities. I think we're getting behind on some of the underground utilities, and that's a discussion we're going to have to have with the community about, what do you want your utilities to look like for the sustainable future?
Okay. We're over our time, but I think we
one
should
more.
allow some more questions, Paul.
One last one. I'm going to make a statement that my street is worse than the mayor's street. There's a lot of people on my street. This is the only street coming out of Kanema. So please take a look at it. I'm going to look carefully at the map. Thank you, John.
Is that
Just to give you a heads up, it's not on there, Paul, but because of the problems we're having there, we intend to do something internally, kind of like what we did with Sunset.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike.
30 seconds, quick. Mostly I want to affirm what Tom Bryan said. There is a PR problem. I know many times driving down streets that are being reworked. Someone will look, didn't that just get done not too long ago? That street's not as bad as this street. There's like, in my mind, kind of a triage, maybe a triage of necessity on a street, and it's not just maybe the condition of the asphalt, but maybe traffic, amount of traffic that goes over it, things like that. That might help many people in Oregon City understand, because there's a feeling that many streets are being reworked often when other streets aren't getting worked at all. And it's a perception, maybe it's a reality, I don't know, but I think that would go hand in hand with the PR, because there's some anger with seeing some streets being redone and others not. And it appears that way sometimes. And then the other question, this is a question, back to this chart, and this may be more of a question with Murray Smith, is pavement has a much shorter lifespan than concrete. And I know oftentimes I spent a little time in the East Coast and Holland, and you see quite a bit more of where streets are static, where there's not a lot of underground utilities. I believe a concrete highway has a 25-year lifespan as opposed to a 12 on asphalt. Is there a cost analysis that's been done to see, gosh, are we going to resurface over 25 years, or just pave it and it's going to be good for possibly 20 years? Is that something that's done where there are streets without a lot of underground utilities?
We have, almost all of our streets have underground utilities, all three of them underground. The concrete is very expensive. Mm-hmm. It's not an overly sustainable product. So in other words, once you've used that, trying to reuse that material is a little more challenging than it is with asphalt anymore. They're getting very good at peeling off that asphalt and reusing that. So it's a product that, and in fact, a lot of our streets, Malala, for instance, 7th Street, we've designed those as perpetual designs, so that the idea there would be, in a few years we may have to go in, because of the amount of traffic and because of that kind of wearing surface, we might have to go in there and mill off the top 2 inches and pave it back, and somebody would say, man, they just did that not too long ago. But that's the design of that particular street. And so trying to educate people about that is a challenge. We've struggled with it. Same thing with preventative maintenance. If we can get people to think of pavement a little bit more like, maybe the siding on their house or changing oil in a car, it's maintenance. So we're trying to get ahead of it. Some of the other streets have really kind of outlived their life, and yet they're still okay. We can still do some spot repairs, but they're really a few years out before we should just kind of live out that life and just let it continue to fail until we dump a bunch of money into it. So that is the balancing act that we're trying to play, and we're trying to play it with less money than the system needs, but we're doing our best. And so I think I hear the educational piece. It is hard to get the word out. We'll come to all your neighborhood meetings if you want. We'll tell you some more.
We have a plan for that. We'll talk about it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Paul, I think it's because your streets are so old. Ours are only 8 years old, and they've already slurried them. Hey, I get to crack a few jokes here. Okay, the next one was for 30 minutes. John Lewis is part of that, so since John's already been up here, we'll take 10 minutes away and make it 20 minutes. Just kidding. Street trees and sidewalk presentations. Peter Walter, Tony Conkle, and John Lewis, and I'll still crack a few jokes. And anybody else who wants to come up. 30 minutes with question and answers for 10 minutes.
Tom, I'd like to just note here that this presentation was put together in response to several of the neighborhood organizations, particularly a big
Petition.
petition that we received from the South End neighborhood. So we decided, since it was such a common concern we were hearing throughout the city, that we should try to get out and put together a lot of information that we could share with the
John,
community.
you have a picture of Rudy?
Huh?
Have a picture of Rudy?
I don't have Rudy with me. I think that's
That's Norm's.
South End neighborhood.
Right here.
That's Norm's.
That's Norm's Rudy. He won't give it up.
Okay,
Thank
whatever
you.
that was all about. Okay.
He walks around with it a lot.
My name is Pete Walter. I'm with the Planning Department, and I'm going to present a brief overview of the city's street tree and sidewalk maintenance requirements. We have presented this already to the Caulfield, Barclay Hills, Tower Vista, and what else? I know there's another one in there, so I apologize if you've heard this before. Yeah.
You said it.
Yep. And neighborhood associations. And so I hope by the end of the presentation you'll have a clear understanding of why the city has a public street tree ordinance and why we have a process for permitting replacement of street trees and how that process is related to the process of sidewalk maintenance and also how we got to where we currently are. Unlike the pavement utility fee, the entire cost of maintaining the sidewalk and the street trees in Oregon City, like many cities, is borne by the abutting property owner. And as Kathy said, and we totally understand that there are people on fixed incomes and limited incomes who face these same costs of sidewalk maintenance related to street trees. So I'll go into my presentation brief. I'll go through this fairly quickly, and at the end of the presentation, what as John has handed out is the sidewalk condition analysis that was done citywide in 2010. There's a lot of data in there, and there's a brief summary of that here. So, Oregon City's street tree canopy is a combination of public and private. Urban canopy is a combination of public and private trees growing on both public and private property. A study in 2007 showed that Oregon City's urban tree canopy is currently was at 26%. And how does that rate against other communities? There's some other communities here. Lake Oswego has a high urban tree canopy percentage of 47%. And then you have majority of communities around about 24-25%. Question is, what is a healthy urban tree canopy? It really depends on the community. I think a lot of communities, for example, Vancouver, Washington, is shooting for a goal of 28% based on a study that they have done. And the health of that urban tree canopy is really dependent on the life of the trees, the species of the trees, how contiguous they are, and those sorts of things. But urban tree canopy on public streets is a significant contributor to that. Multiple benefits of having a healthy urban tree canopy, including carbon storage and uptake, energy conservation, water quality, wildlife habitat, real estate values, and community health benefits. There have been several studies about how having a healthy public tree canopy along your streets has a significant effect on air and water quality and pollution control through the protection of the force of water falling onto the streets, reducing that water impact onto the ground, allowing infiltration into the ground, and having a reducing effect on runoff and flooding, as much as 30% in some studies. Mature street trees also provide shade for our paved areas, which lowers the temperature of water flowing into the storm system, and that helps to increase the amount of oxygen available for aquatic life and fish. And trees also produce oxygen as a natural part of their life cycle, and they also remove airborne pollutants, including ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. Few studies have shown how trees actually contribute to property values for the properties that abut them. The significant one in Portland, it was done in southeast Portland, where a lot of the homes abut large planter strips, and the trees are fairly big, showed that having a tree of significant size within about 100 feet of your house at an average equivalent of $7,000 to the selling price of a home. There are also quantifiable benefits with respect to stormwater management, and those were estimated, as well as other benefits, that were estimated at $45 million annually for a cost to abutting property owners of $3.3 million. Similar studies in Lake Oswego and through trade magazines like Northwest Builders showing that a similar effect. Oregon City has had a public tree ordinance since 1998, and we first adopted a street tree list, which classifies what tree is correctly to plant in a planter strip width in 2001. And prior to that, the standards were fewer and inconsistently applied. We had fairly narrow planter strips for new subdivisions, and developers oftentimes would plant what was readily available, such as Norway maples and various other types of species which are inappropriate for the size of the planter strips they grow in. And as a result of that, sidewalks lifted, curbs crack as street trees began to outgrow those spaces. Even when properly planted, eventually trees may become diseased, die, or pose a hazard. And so the process of requiring replacement trees has become more standardized in the last few years as a response to this issue. And so I'll briefly go into what that entails. So John just explained all about pavement maintenance. So Public Works uses the pavement maintenance utility fee to maintain this area, shown as between the curbs. And property owners abutting the right-of-way are responsible from the back of the sidewalk to the curb, which includes the sidewalk, as well as the street trees. Now, how do we know when a hazard is occurring? We have hazards caused by damage from trees and limbs falling into the right-of-way or falling onto private property. That's an obvious imminent hazard. And then we also have what's called a tripping hazard, which is defined as a lip or a lifted panel greater than an inch or more. And so if there is a tripping hazard, it is enforced through the Code Enforcement Department of Oregon City, and they will someone will make them aware of a particular sidewalk situation, and they will notify the abutting property owner that the sidewalk repair needs to occur. And if it is a tree that is causing the hazard due to the roots lifting up a panel, the city's policy is that that tree can be replaced at a ratio of 1 tree to 1 tree, regardless of the size of the existing tree. Because oftentimes the repair will require grinding down the root or the stump so that the panel can be put back down into place or repoured. It's an expensive repair, and there is also a standard for the sidewalk thickness of 4 inches. And that will ensure that the repair, has a lifespan that is worthwhile. There's also some tree clearance distances specified by the code. Not all situations are going to meet this. This is what our current code requires in new subdivisions. And these are 15 feet from a street light, 5 feet from a fire hydrant, 20 foot from a street intersection, 5 feet at mature height below a power line, and then we have 7-foot clearance above all sidewalks and 10-foot clearance above the streets. Those are minimums. We also require that the planter strips be kept clear of weeds, obstructing vegetation, and trash.
What does it say about pre-existing conditions?
Oh, yeah. Pre-existing conditions do exist that may not meet these clearance situations. And if those are a problem, we will look into it and make sure that the hazard can be alleviated somehow. Depends on each situation. In some cases, you may have a street tree that's growing closer to an intersection and interfering with a view corridor, and it may need to be just a situation where it's pruned up to the right height, but in general, when we're planting new trees, we want to observe these clearances.
So there's two different standards.
This is for any new development that's developed. We're looking for these. There's been other developments that have been built that didn't meet this criteria.
Because this is current code.
And so if you have pre-existing situations, you don't have to meet it.
Correct. Yeah, unless
like our tree has a big cut out of it because of the power lines, but it goes up above.
Yeah, I should mention that power lines have easements as well, and PGE has got a right to prune and maintain trees within their easements, and that's not the city being involved in those situations. They just have that right. Yes.
Is this clearance thing that's on intersections? I see a lot of times. I see a lot of structural impediments that prevent proper view at intersections, and in fact, it degrades or the safety, public safety, significantly. And I get into this note here of pre-existing situations or conditions. Don't they supersede virtually anything when public safety is being compromised?
Yeah, there's also a separate part of the code, Paul, the site distance triangle part of the code that requires that the site distance in a triangle be no greater than 3 feet. Trees are exempt from that site distance triangle provision as long as they are limbed up to 8 feet. And so that.
How about fences?
Fences have to be 3 feet tall within that site distance triangle, and that is that the size of that triangle depends on the speed of the street, the posted speed limit of the streets. So each situation we have to look at a little differently.
But you are going to have pre-existing conditions with fences, because we implemented the 3-foot fence in the front yard, I believe in 2006 or so. So before that, you could actually build a 6-foot fence in your front yard, and there is no permitting process for that. So that would be a situation where if you had a pre-existing fence that was built 10, 15 years ago, unless it's brought to our attention, it wouldn't be addressed.
Would that be even a cyclone fence that you can see through?
We do not, under the current code, we do not allow fences over 3.5 feet in the front yard.
To be constructed.
Correct.
No matter what type that you could see, and it's
Correct.
like a rail or
It's just
something.
a strict height limit.
But if public safety is being compromised,
Right.
then should we be reporting that?
You can certainly report it, and we would look into it.
If there's a site distance problem at an intersection, you should report it to code enforcement, and then they'll go out and look at it and see if it's something that they need to go to the property owners and ask them to take care of it.
That's separate.
And they have done that. They
Tree
do
conversations,
that.
that's all separate of that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if there's someone that has a large tree in their yard, and then the decision has to come up, and it needs to be removed because it's a hazard tree, we would still apply these same criteria. There may not be a tree that goes back there because it doesn't meet this 15 feet from a street light or 5 feet from a hydrant. So that just because there used to be a tree there doesn't mean that it's going to have to go back if it doesn't meet this criteria.
That's correct. So there are 2 permits involved if your sidewalk is buckling due to a street tree. There's a sidewalk repair permit, which is a right-of-way permit from Public Works. Public Works inspector will visit before and after the repair. That is a reduced fee permit. And there's also a street tree permit from planning, which is a no-fee permit. We will work with the owner to find the right tree to replace in that location. We will rely on the city's adopted street tree list or a municipal street tree list from an adjacent municipality, since they are also organized according to planter strip width. We can also rely on an arborist's recommendation for the species of tree. The reason that we're more flexible with regard to the species is because our current street tree list was adopted in 2001, I believe, and has not yet been updated to reflect certain hybrids which are available, which are just as appropriate for certain strips. For example, very small strips, 3 feet or less. The only thing that's really going to do well there and not cause a problem in the future are certain very small, slow-growing trees, dogwoods and various other maple hybrids and things like that. So we will work with the owner to replace and get that tree back in the ground after the sidewalk repair is done.
Pete, before you go on, could you explain for those who aren't familiar with it what a reduced fee road permit means?
Right-of-way permit, reduced fee, and I believe the fee for that is, what, $68?
So the homeowner applies for this or something?
Yes,
is
the
that what you're
homeowner
talking
would
about?
apply to the Public Works Department for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The idea is if you're working in the right-of-way, you want to make sure, we want to make sure that there's a permit there so that if something goes wrong, it's covered by the permit. Or it means that you can't do whatever you want because
So
it's
the
the
homeowner
public
should
right-of-way.
first ask.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because there's a standard. The sidewalk repair has to meet Americans with Disability Act's clearances and that sort of thing.
Thanks.
I haven't heard an answer to the question Tom asked as to what that fee is.
Oh, I believe it's $68.
Yeah, we looked.
I
I think we're at $68.
Thank you.
So we are trying to preserve our urban tree canopy, and we are looking at alternatives to tree removal. When the property owner wants to try to, keep that tree in the ground and make a sidewalk repair that meets a public works standard as well. We haven't done a lot of this, but there are certain situations in the city where we've used meandering sidewalks, narrower sidewalks. I don't believe we've done any pervious pavers yet or rubber sidewalks, but we have.
Pavers up at Warner Milne realignment.
Oh, okay. Well, great.
Right, that's pervious concrete.
Pervious concrete. And, this would allow the root zone of the tree to still serve a purpose, and one of the things that you have to be careful is not paving over the root zones of trees because that will have an effect on the life of the tree. We can also look at saw cutting panels and shaving down panels as long as those repairs meet the approval of the city engineer and relevant Americans with Disabilities Act standards. Some proper tree care suggestions that, from the City of New York, which are just as applicable here. Choosing the right tree for the planter strip size. Observing proper clearances. These are Oregon City ones that I've just mentioned. We do encourage owners who replant a tree to install a root barrier parallel to the sidewalk, if that is appropriate. That is a barrier that forces the tree roots down into the ground as opposed to allowing them to grow out underneath the sidewalk or along the sidewalk. Prune your dead branches immediately, since they are conduit for insects and disease. Don't overwater. Don't over-fertilize. Add only the nutrients your tree needs. And don't pile mulch against the trees. When it gets wet, it can encourage rot at the base. And always use a certified arborist if you need a professional. Now I'll switch gears and give you an overview of the sidewalk survey project. I won't spend a lot of time on the numbers here, but just give you a brief overview. Public Works interns surveyed current condition of all the sidewalks in Oregon City for ADA compliance in 2010. They rated the sidewalks as excellent, above average, average, below average, and poor based on sidewalk width, presence of raised panels, cracking, and what's called maximum cross slope. Sidewalk width minimum for ADA compliance is 3 feet. Raised panels can be no greater than a half an inch. Cracking is a metric that is based on a visual survey, and that's explained in the methodology that you have in front of you. And the maximum cross slope is the side-to-side slope. and that is a 2% maximum. An excellent rating was given for sidewalk segment that met all of those categories. A sidewalk rating of poor basically meant that a handicapped pedestrian could hardly navigate the sidewalk section. So when they were looking at sidewalk segments, they would call a sidewalk segment the distance between two streets, two intersections. That would be a segment. And this shows the total number. Total miles is probably more explanatory. We have 137 linear miles of sidewalks in the city. And we're looking at about 50 to 60% of the sidewalks in the city are average to excellent condition. Cracking, this shows how much slight, moderate, and severe sidewalk cracking percentages. About 50% had none, 28% slight, 18.4 moderate, and 4% severe. They also looked at the presence of sidewalk obstructions, both vertical and horizontal, in the presence of utility poles, street lights, street signs, fire hydrants, mailboxes, vegetation, and other. And then at the bottom of this list, you see raised panels, which exceed ½ an inch. The total number counted in the survey was 2,231. What we've done with this data is going out to the neighborhood associations, actually separating out by neighborhoods graphically so that you can see the individual streets and their condition on a map. That's a lot of information to show citywide on it, so I did not include a map with this PowerPoint, but there is a map that you can look at, and we can, when we go to the South End Neighborhood Association, we'll break that out individually. Same for any of the other neighborhood associations that we haven't provided this information to yet. I'm just going to skip over these next two slides, but they also looked at curb ramps and what the surfaces and condition was of all the curb ramps, if they were curb ramps or not, and whether there were ramp cracking and those sorts of things. So that is a very brief overview of how we got to where we are today. If you have any questions about the street trees, call the planning department and ask for me. We have a guide to street tree replacement, which is on the web. We also have that hard copies that we hand out at the counter. If people need that emailed to them or mailed to them, I've also dropped that in the mail. The process is pretty painless. What takes homeowners the longest is selecting a tree, because a lot of times the nurseries may not have the tree in stock that they want and that is on our list. So in some cases, we will just work with the homeowner until they're sure that they have found the tree they want. And when they say, I'm going to plant this tree in this spot, we'll send them a letter saying, you're good to go. We'll inspect it. We'll give you 30 days to put it in the ground, and longer if you need a little time, such as if the planting conditions aren't conducive at the time that you're doing your sidewalk repair. You may need to wait until the rains start or when the ground is wet in order to get that tree planted, but we'll do that. And then we coordinate very closely with Chuck Carter in the Public Works Department on the sidewalk repair, and to make sure that that the street tree is done after the sidewalk repair. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to ask.
Okay, was there anything else? Tony, were you going to add something?
Is that all right if I go over?
Can I ask one quick question? And kind of, since everybody's in the room, I'll probably call this too. I'm obviously the downtown Main Street. The trees on Main Street don't appear to fit the categories that we were talking about. Many are 5 feet from a light pole, or 2 feet from a light pole. Mm-hmm. They don't seem to be the right species. The canopy seems to be awfully opaque. In other words, at daytime, actually in the daytime, they look somewhat disheveled, unkempt, except in front of my building. And a little judicial pruning worked. But then at nighttime, which I'm also open from 7 a.m. till 2, they make the street look small and dark, a little bit pedestrian unfriendly because of the shading from the lights. Even with the new street lights, they still will. The question, since everybody's here, I've brought it up several times, or asked as people have walked the streets, but the new sidewalks coming in, there's zero plans to change anything with the trees. My understanding is the trees will remain. They'll remain in the same places. And before the actual pouring of the concrete sidewalks, is there any way can we look at this again? Can the city look at it again and reevaluate what they're really doing with these trees that are very mature and large and kind of at their older adult lifespan?
Well, I know that there's probably some coordination with the Public Works Main Street project manager required on that, because that's a...
From what I understand, that actually those trees, most of them are pear trees and some little maple trees. Those actually do fit within those planter areas. And in terms of how much shade and how much light is taken away by trees, that really is a subjective thing, because I know people that think we should have bigger trees on Main Street. I know people that really like to have light in their buildings, so don't put any trees on my Main Street. So there's quite a wide spectrum of opinions on that. But the new trees that we are planting on 10th Street, and actually there are unfortunately a few trees are going to be removed on Main Street because of site distance issues and because of some of the new curbing. But the new trees we placed, we worked really hard with planning to select trees that were on the street tree list for that application. And then there may be some improvements as we put in the new streetlights too, because we were trying to be careful about where the trees were relative to the new streetlights. So we'll see on that.
Okay, so the trees will stay what we have, I believe.
That was one of the goals of the project, was to keep the street trees, because they were already, many of them had been there for 8 years. Some have been there even longer, and we understood that it was the desire of the community to keep as many as we could.
Okay. It's 20 to 9, and we've got to see 3 more questions here, and Tony wishes to speak. So I'm going to ask everyone who's going to ask questions to keep it to a couple minutes each. We went over in the last one. We can go over a little bit on this, but let's keep our questions and responses as brief as we can so we can get on to our other business. Tony.
Okay, so I guess I'd just like to circle back that if you do receive a code enforcement violation, we're more than happy to work with you and help you and let your folks know to call us. We will work with them. We have to put time limits in code enforcement to get a response or to move the process forward. But as Pete was saying, there are issues that come up, whether it be the ability to get a contractor in, ability to find the right trees. So as long as whoever receives a code enforcement violation is working with the city towards completing that project, we will work with them until we can get the situation remedied. This subject was brought up, and our task was to figure out what alternatives can we come up with. Historically, what we did is said, take the tree out, put the new sidewalk in. So out of this process and the discussions amongst the other departments is to try and look at these other alternatives that Pete was describing, whether it be meander the sidewalk into your yard, give us an easement if you want to save the tree. We need to meet ADA requirements for width, but there are examples where you can notch the sidewalk in to get around an existing tree to try and save that tree. The other standard that we changed was the one-to-one replacement. We've expanded the definition of what hazardous is, because we did realize the hardship. If you just wanted to go take out a healthy tree in the planter strip, and the tree was 24 inches in diameter, there's a replacement schedule to there, and off the top of my head, I think you got to replace it with 6 trees of 2-inch caliper. Now, if that same tree is lifting your sidewalk, we'll acknowledge it as a hazard, and it'll be a one-to-one replacement. So that's another change that we made to try and lessen the impact. As Pete was saying, we've also looked at, and unfortunately, every one of these situations is unique. There's not one statement or one standard that's going to apply in every situation because of the complexity and differences in the impacts. But where we can grind a lifted lip down and still meet the requirements for structural integrity, we will look at that as an option. So we're trying to expand the options that are available to homeowners that are faced with this situation. We're also looking at if there's ways that we can somehow coordinate improvements in a neighborhood. That's something that we're trying to investigate with other communities to see how that's worked. If we've identified a neighborhood that has significant curb issues and street tree issues, is there a way that we could work through the city where we would manage some type of a contract? But we want to see how that works in other jurisdictions. The homeowner would still be responsible to pay, but we're hoping through economies of scale we can keep that price down and do some of the legwork to facilitate that process. Ideally, it would be wonderful, but as you saw how many miles of linear sidewalk there are in this city, it would be wonderful to say the city will take over all responsibility and we will have a program to go in and identify these neighborhoods. We'll go into each neighborhood every year. We'll replace the street trees. We'll replace the sidewalks where we've identified them. But without some realistic and continuous form of funding, such as the pavement utility fee, it's not in the city's budget or their capabilities to do that. That would be a long term. It would be a commitment that the city would be taking over indefinitely, and without a stable funding source, we don't have the ability to do it. So we're trying to find alternatives to try and accommodate the concerns we've heard with the resources that we have available to us.
Obnoxious.
That thing just throws me off a little bit, doesn't it?
Try being a speaker when I hit you up on the stage. If you could wrap it up, Tony.
Yeah, I certainly will. I think the other important thing to throw out there is that when Pete was talking about the benefits of the trees, the city has to maintain stormwater requirements through our NPDES permit for pollution discharge. And street trees are an important factor and benefit to help us achieve some of those goals. As Pete was saying, it helps with retention of water that's coming down. It helps with shading, which helps with the water temperature quality or water temperature issues that we have. So there are multiple benefits other than aesthetics and property value. They also serve as part of our functioning stormwater management system. So I'll go ahead and wrap it up with that and be happy to answer any questions.
I know we have 3 people, and I'm going to let them ask their questions before we close this out, but I saw Mayor Doug's hand up.
Just one comment. Also, about these to clog up the storm.
Okay. All right. Tom.
Yes, I had 3 things I just wanted to mention. Number one, I'm very concerned that 25.5% of our sidewalks are either below average or poor in terms of condition. That bothers me. Secondly, I'm bothered by the fact that this subject was discussed quite at length in one of the City Commission either meetings or workshops, I don't recall which. And at that time, I suggested that we contact the Nurserymen's Association, located right in Wilsonville, Oregon, to find out what kinds of new trees might be available. And it sounds as though we only went to neighboring cities to find out what their lists look like. Well, their lists aren't any better than our lists in terms of performance of those trees in terms of cracking sidewalks. And it doesn't sound like we've talked to the experts yet. So that's a concern.
Can I respond to that one real quick before you go to your last question? Or
All
your
right.
last comment? Is that we've reinstituted the Natural Resource Committee, and they are about to start their process. And we felt that taking up this issue of street trees and street types and updating the street tree list would be one of the first tasks that they take on to not only introduce them to this issue that we have in the city, but also it would be something that it would be appropriate with the experts that are going to make up that committee to be a part of that process. So we haven't ignored
The
it.
point remains that if they're only going to rely on the City of Portland or the City of Canby or Wilsonville or whomever for their background knowledge rather than the experts in the industry, we're no further ahead than we are, and that 25.5% is going to increase. So, that's my point.
Well, I'm sure
They
a lot
haven't
of these
heard those
things-
comments. Those of you in this room have heard those comments.
I think the majority of municipalities' street tree lists have gone through a vetting process that included overview by a forestry professional or nursery professional. That's why we felt comfortable working with adjacent municipalities' lists for that reason. Some cities have a arborist on staff. Oregon City does not.
I will continue to follow the issue up with you.
Yeah, fine.
The third point I wanted to make was using Nancy's terminology. Some of these things are subjective decisions. It seems to me that, based on part of what I heard tonight, that fish are more important than people tripping and falling and breaking their back or their hip or whatever. I hope that's not the case. It seemed to me that the need for trees providing cooler temperatures for fish was more important than human beings. And maybe I'm misinterpreting.
I apologize if that's the impression that you had. That is not our intention at all. Complying with ADA requirements and making sure that we have safe pedestrian walkways is a priority. If there are ways that we can accommodate both, we would like to do that, because from this community we've heard a desire to protect trees, to maintain them wherever we can. If it's infeasible to save a tree in order to fix a sidewalk, the tree will be removed and the sidewalk will be replaced.
I applaud you for your following ADA. It is a federal regulation, and I can understand why we would want to follow it. I am concerned, though, that we're really relying on environmental issues such as fish.
Okay, my quick question. I'm going to use as an example our Trailview HOA up in, that was built about 8 years ago. And when the developer probably came to the city and described to you what he was going to do, they put these trees in all up and down the strip, but they never took the burlap off. So they all the trees were kind of dying. So then they came in and redid those trees, took the burlap off, but they stuck them up so high that now I'm noticing, I talked earlier about the slurry seals already in 8 years, but all the sidewalks are starting to lift, and these trees aren't very big. It's because the developer didn't really put them down deep enough after they took out the burlap bags. Does the city go in like they do with permits for electrical and check to see what they're doing with these strips when developers are putting those kind of things in? Because it's kind of a mess up there now. Just wondered.
Go ahead.
Well, we do sidewalk inspections, but I know the tree inspections often happen as the home is built, right? So I'm not sure if the trees you're talking about are the ones along Holcomb Boulevard. Which
No, these are in Trailview, along Trailview Drive and Willamette Drive and all those.
So most of those should have been built, installed by the home builder.
He did, but as you know, Syntex did that, and then Syntex is no longer in Oregon, and then it got bought out. So there's nothing really the HOA can do, and we were all questioning one time, well, did the city have any requirements to come in and check?
Usually the inspection happens after the fact. They're in, they're the right species, but not typically somebody standing there as they're
Understandably.
placing the tree.
I'm just wondering in the future, as development does occur, if that's a consideration you might get, and there, since we do have a consideration about sidewalks lifting, is that make sure that developers just don't do a quick job of it and then leave, and then the citizens or the residents who are responsible for that get stuck with a bill to deal with the trees and the sidewalks because the developer just did a quick job and left. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. I've heard it voiced more than
Really?
once.
Okay,
Yeah.
we thought we were the only ones.
Yeah.
Now, we've also heard situations of when they excavate the hole to put the tree in, sometimes there'll be leftovers from the road pour, such as rock.
There it is,
and that impacts it as well. You know, I think one thing is looking at our engineering standard and requiring that root beer be planted will help drive those roots down deeper. And that's a new change as well.
Because we are amazed how quickly the roots have come up to the top and they're destroying it.
No, I don't. I have to tell you though, in terms of inspecting each tree as it gets placed, we do not have the staff to do that.
I
So
imagine.
even if we have construction standards that say you need to put in root barriers, we won't have somebody out there looking at you plant the tree, which is too bad, but that's a fact.
Yeah, I figured as
Seems
much.
like we could do something with a photo, or require the homeowner or the developer to submit. Yeah, it is, we're not going to be able to.
What
wish there
you're
was
really
a way-
talking about there is a standard for how the soil is mixed and how deep the hole is. And
These weren't very deep.
We're really just checking to see that the tree is there, and the specification for how it's planted is on the plans.
Right.
And we're holding the developer to that.
I had no idea I was going to ask that question. It's come up in our neighborhood, like, is there any way the city could help us, saying, developers, you did this, and look at all these trees, now all these homeowners are,
That's
but there's
tough.
nothing we could probably do,
Yeah.
and we're kind of stuck. Okay, moving on to Kathy.
Okay, I have a couple, because I'm with South End Neighborhood Association, Hazel Grove Wrestling Farm. You're coming the 17th of November. Is this the presentation you will be giving? Are you going to be giving John and Norm what all your new policies are, or what you are, the ordinances that you are talking about now? Or is it too late to be putting any input on what the ordinances and the changes are? I thought this was, there's something being adopted and you were going to present that you're...
Well, this is, with the exception of the fact that the information is going to be tailored to your neighborhood, this is essentially the presentation we would be giving. If there's further information you want, we can provide that. We're not planning to make any changes to our current tree code. As Tony mentioned, the Natural Resource Committee will be meeting, and one of their work plans for 2012 will be to update our street tree list. So,
Well, for one thing, when the new developer come in, if we ever get that because of the way the economy is, then maybe the ordinance should have that they put a barrier down, that they, and the hole is dug, and if it finds out it comes up and does a sidewalk, that they can be fined for it later, no matter what. There's no time limit for their inadequacy of doing this project, because it endangers people. And I know that, are you going to have this presentation in hand so people can look at it? Or
yeah,
how are
we
you
can
gonna-
make hard copies for people. We also put them on the web.
Not everybody has a
Yeah.
website. So I didn't know if you wanted, because South End is the one that really started.
I know, they were concerned that they had brought it forward and they hadn't heard anything. And I said, well, they're coming, so...
But I think there'd be some people that are older that might need the visual. So, I mean, a few might not hurt.
Yeah, I can certainly make copies. That's
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Particularly your first few PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, because they...
We saw them here, but
Yeah.
people are going to want a hard copy of those.
And well, and some people are going to feel that if this is similar to what you've talked about before, so you're going to have to point out exactly the difference of what and how you will help them and how you will correct this, and that you will find an arborist that they can do, because that's an expense. When Norm showed what was there and how much it cost, that's a long bit, quite a bit of money out of somebody's pocket when they're on a fixed income.
And
So
especially when it was his neighbor's tree.
yeah, and it wasn't even his tree. So, you know, this needs to be...
I think we can provide this kind of information, and if there's other questions you think John might have or anybody might have that can give them to us early, that would be great. But but the other little problem that we have is that we're not really producing, other than some changes we're making with how we kind of approach the violations and updating of the tree code. We're not, dealing with sidewalk replacement is a much bigger issue and a much more costly issue.
Well, I'll let John
We've
and Norm
explained
do
that
it.
to South End before. We'll do
Yeah.
it again, right? We'll do that
Have
again.
fun.
Okay. Thank you, Pete, Tony, and John, for all your presentations tonight.
It's better every time I'm here.
Okay, it's 5 to 9, and again, a special thank you to all the presenters tonight, and it's very good presentations. Let's go right into agenda item number 4, approval of minutes from October 3rd.
Opportunity to take a look at the minutes that were sent out earlier this time than last time, and I'd like to encourage someone to make a motion to approve these.
I'll make the motion.
Do I hear a
Second.
second? Who was that? Who said that?
Steve,
Okay, Steve.
seconded.
Tom and Steve.
Okay.
I didn't second anything.
No.
Did you?
It was Steve.
I
It was
seconded
Steve.
it.
It was Steve.
I made
And
the
Larry.
Okay.
And Larry.
Steve Tom.
motion. Right. Good picking on you.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Aye.
I abstained.
Yep.
that
We weren't
what it
here,
means?
so we don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. 2 abstained.
Well, 3.
3. Okay, number 5, old business, proposed changes to Clackamas Park. It's an update from Larry Hamlin.
We have submitted a letter to the city council, and we got a response back, and we will be submitting a request to Parks and Planning, and hopefully we can get this put to bed. And we are going to, after we get the first part where we're going to have the handicap parking at the park, we're going to go out and see if we can get private funding to build handicap accessible ramps at the park. Thank you.
Any questions of Larry? Okay. Item number 5, that was what it was. 6, new business. Any new business?
Can I ask a comment from
Larry?
Chris?
Is that under new business or under
Well, it
roundtable?
is. Well, I've never brought it up before. And it's more police stuff, so I didn't know who. Well, I went through the school zone at the high school, and I'm going 20. And somebody does not like that. And if they had the little camera that can tell you how far they're behind me, it's like he was licking my bumper. And so I decided to pull over and let him go his 25 and 30. Then when I saw when he turned into Glen Oak, I gave him the honk. So they say, well, why did you have to go that fast? There's nobody there. I'm trying to not get a ticket and go the speed by that high school because it's from 7 to 5, and they're going right in your butt.
You're doing the right thing, Kathy.
I know. I already know. I have to say, yes. I had a ticket. It was important.
Is that a yellow or a white sign?
You know, actually, from what I understand, the city's been working with the school district to put in flashing lights to
that
help
would be so
control
much
that
nicer.
that school zone.
If someone's in a hurry, they're-
It did take a long time because the district is super busy and.
But it's happening on the bypass as you go down. It's 55, it's 45, and 35. And I'll be darned if I'm the slowest person in town going down there. About the time I go 45 in the 35, I'm going to get the ticket. But they are all speeding down there so fast, and they're going to come up onto something.
Okay.
So as a result.
I wasn't trying to be facetious with that. In our area, an officer told us if it was white, you have to follow. If it's yellow, you don't have to.
That's correct.
Number 7, ask OCPW. Nancy Kreshower, that portion has been canceled.
Hold on.
Okay, Nancy.
I'm going to try to keep mine brief, Chair Guile. The most important thing to tell everybody about is that in the next few days, we're going to have two-way traffic on Main Street. So there's a very, very charming little video on the website and William Gifford was going to put it on the CIC Facebook.
Oh, but he didn't.
But you will still do that anyway. But
It sounds like you will,
be
though.
careful when you're down there as a pedestrian and a driver, because for a while it's going to take people to get used to what's changed. If you're a pedestrian, you have to look both ways when you cross Main Street now. And the parking has already been changed, and it's just imminent depending on the weather and a few other things. So just be careful.
Construction derby, I think.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I wanted to invite you all to and spread the word is on November 21st in this room, we're going to have a public meeting to help everybody get updated on our water master plan. And we've recently updated the entire thing, and we want to get people informed about it. And then I will.
It's here?
Yes.
It's an open house?
Yes, it's
Oh,
from
okay.
7 to 9. And it's not an open house, no. It's a presentation. Because it's too complicated to do as an open house. It's a sit down, listen, ask questions, discuss. And then we will be coming to the CIC with the same presentation at your December meeting. But these are really, really important topics to become informed about, because it will affect your water rates, and it'll also affect something that's going to be hitting the city in the face in about 3 years, and that is a water rate rollback that was voted in our charter in 1996 or thereabouts. So very, very important stuff. And so please come and find out about it.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot of other stuff, but I don't have time.
Yeah, you don't want me to ask you, right, or to let you know, right? I'm going to let you know anyway, though. I put
Not
question, yes. Because it's talking about the changes on Singer Hill. Because I've had a couple complaints from people within.
The changes on Singer Hill?
Well, it's the fact that one lady that I know is, she gets the bus, has to walk up because she doesn't make it from downtown. The buses are really, you talk about transportation, talk about no buses after a certain hour. And she's going to walk across to go up Singer Hill. But somebody's through the middle of the sidewalk because they didn't realize, because there used to be a designated 2 lines saying sidewalk, and now it's like people are forgetting. There's no light up there anymore. It's the 4-way stop still, but the light isn't there to run there. And, she just told them to go ahead and go. So, they're having issues of people trying to get across there and not get hit.
You know where she's talking about? I have no
Look at it.
idea.
10th and Main.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Singer Hill, at the bottom of Singer Hill.
Okay.
On the new
All right.
section.
On the
Committee-
main
It's not
section.
finished yet. either.
Committee reports. Item number 8, Geological Symposium Committee. Who's going to address that?
Well, we have 4 members on the committee here.
Well, then one of you do it, not 4 of you.
Well, it's happening Thursday night. The venue has been changed. It's going to be meeting at the Willamette Falls, the Providence Willamette Falls Hospital Education Center on Washington and 15th in Washington, 7 p.m. Thursday night. The topic is going to be earthquakes and emergency preparedness, and there'll be refreshments, and it starts at 7 o'clock, and it'll be in the auditorium. So much more pleasant venue than last time, and Steve Van Haverbeek and Paul Edgar and Nancy and Christine Krasinski and a small part myself has been working on getting this to go, and we're happy to have our chair Tom Guile will be our MC again. End of report.
And we've got some, Dr. Scott Burns from Portland State University is going to be one of our speakers. And also Ian Madden from the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. We have a guy from the county from the Emergencies Operations Center. And Beth Dudley, and then someone from the State Insurance Bureau. So all very, very helpful stuff to do with earthquakes
Okay.
and emergency preparedness.
Hope there's a wet bar this time. Attracts more people.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that you suspend the Video Opportunities Committee until such time as
I
we have
agree.
enough energy to make that happen again, so we don't have to keep having this on the
I
agenda.
know. I agree. Let's do that.
Suspended.
Reactivation
Do we
of
have to
neighborhood.
vote that?
I'm sorry, what?
Do we have to vote on that?
I don't think so. It was just a committee I had started up, just suggesting back then, so it's
The
not.
chair made it, the chair can recall him.
And there's nothing really happening. Everybody's got other priorities right now. That was the one where we were going to do neighborhoods. I'd still like to do it with everyone, but at a later date. Reactivation of neighborhood associations, Gaffney Lane. Somebody?
It was great.
We did it. Yeah, very, very pleased to see. Paul was there. Both Van Haverbeeks were there, if I can speak to you in that terminology. And and since I did, both Rickenbachs were there, and I very much appreciate all that support. We had a couple of great guest speakers. Dick Orr from BCT. We had Beth Dudley speaking about neighborhood mapping and CERT, and Chris organized the whole thing, and it was brilliant. They make some great cookies, and we have a new chair and a secretary, and we've scheduled our next meeting for January.
Can we introduce?
And they aren't here yet.
It's not tonight.
Okay.
Terry Campbell is his name.
Terry
Thank
Campbell
you.
was the chair.
Thank you.
Land Use Committee.
Paul.
Anything?
Nothing, other than we get some stuff in, we respond to it and send it back to the city.
All right. I'm proud to announce that we took care of 4 subjects on there in 10 minutes. We're now down to the roundtables. That's cool. So let's start with Chris this time.
I have nothing.
Okay. Mike.
Just a couple things. I kind of wanted to talk about speed again. Working with ODOT, it's really difficult. We have traffic that comes through the tunnel extraordinarily fast, 50 miles an hour, and you can hear tires squealing. And last night we had an incident, and my good neighbor Stan Anderson is out of business for the next month. A car collided and hit a natural gas line. It was pretty spectacular. The guy lived, and we basically had a zero night because of the excellent response from our responders. But speed again is an issue on McLaughlin, not only in Kenema, but that whole strip. And ODOT's very reluctant to put up the 30 mile an hour with the radar saying your speed. We have that on Lynn Avenue, and it works really well. It's not. I don't think it's an Oregon City jurisdiction. It's a ODOT issue, and so it's because some of my local guys on the force sympathize, but they can't really do much with that. So that was probably the main thing I just wanted to talk about.
Okay. With Roundtable, anyone in the room is invited to say a few words if they have something to say. So, Tony.
Oh, thank you. I guess that maybe I'll give an update a little bit on the Blue Heron site. As many of you have probably read in the paper, Metro was looking at potentially purchasing that property when it went into bankruptcy back in February. The bankruptcy trustee set a bid date for the middle of October. About a week before that bid date was due, they extended it to mid-December. So in that time, we're working with Metro and trying to put together a stakeholder group to consider that purchase of that property. And so right now we're doing quite a bit of due diligence, looking at the site, trying to understand what's there, what the potential no-go situations, if they do exist out there, trying to identify those as we're going through our due diligence process. You probably also saw, may or may not have seen that on the morning of the auction, so the trustee, the judge authorized the trustee to liquidate all the equipment on the site. So that the day of the auction was supposed to happen, a company called NRI out of Canada purchased all of the equipment on the site. Our understanding is there's still negotiations still going on, but it appears that they're going to have about 2 years to liquidate and clean up the site. And when I say clean up, there's extensive carrying costs to the property every month. So they're looking at consolidating some of the electrical, consolidating some of the stormwater, potentially consolidating some of the fire suppression, the fire system out there, and other improvements as they go through the demolition of the existing equipment on the site. You'll potentially see some buildings demolished on the site. We're working closely with the trustee. They're well aware of the 2002 PGE study and the identification of the historic structures on those sites that was done during that study. But at this time, none of the structures on the site are designated either on the National Register or on our local inventory. Another complicating factor is that while you're in federal bankruptcy, you're not allowed to adopt zoning regulations. Essentially, the property's kind of frozen right now while they deal with the liquidation and bankruptcy process. But like I said, we've been working closely with both the trustee and NRI to date. So that's kind of an update on that.
Tony, appreciate it. I don't think Steve has anything to say.
Wanted a better view.
You just came up to wait, right? Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Anderson from the Hillendale Neighborhood Association. Just currently nominated and elected co-chair along with Ray Gordon. You're still going to have a Ray. Yes. Yeah. Well.
Can you sing?
Along with Ray and myself as co-chairs, Willie Olson was again elected secretary-treasurer. A young lady by the name of Marion Dye is going to be acting as her understudy or assistant, so that we have someone on second base in that position. And of course, William is our land use chair. One of the biggest things going on in Hillendale is Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock, grand opening of Safeway. And I know there's going to be a lot of representation from Hillendale, but let's all try to get out there if we can. 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning for their grand opening.
Yeah, actually, Steve, I heard that the grand opening is actually, I mean, they'll be open at 5 a.m., 5 a.m., but the ribbon cutting and all the hoopla is going to be at 9.
Thank you.
This Wednesday.
Thank you very
This
much.
Wednesday, yeah. The band's going to play. And
then coming up in our January meeting, we're hoping to have Diane Phillips from Safeway to come and speak and be officially welcomed by our neighborhood association, along with Peter, Walter, and Tony are scheduled to show up and tell us a little bit more about the planning department. Thank you.
Okay. Next time, please do that in harmony. Sing it like Ray would.
Well, I wish I could.
We expect a duet. Back there.
Scott, what's happening in Gaffney?
Not Gaffney.
On TV, yeah.
The only thing I would say is that a lot of my neighbors.
You can't hear it, and then I can't write it on the minutes. Thank you.
There you go. Our neighborhood pretty much is made up just of residences. It's not businesses to speak of or anything else. And as was mentioned by Tony and some of the other individuals from the city, one of our border areas is Leland Road. Okay. I've had neighbors say that if they could sell their house, they'd move out of Oregon City strictly because we can spend tons of money reworking an intersection on Main Street, but we can't cover up an open ditch along a road that hundreds of children moving into new subdivisions walk to every day to go to school. Other than that, things are pretty good. They're really quiet there. And,
You'd go great on Jay Leno. Drop that zinger right in there.
You know, I really, it is really disheartening almost sometimes to try to talk to your neighbors about city involvement when the water rate, you know, the deal. My neighbor goes, well, yeah, well, Mayor Norris said that this money was going to fix all of our woes. Yeah, you know, and that everybody picks their own battle to make, but there's a lot of people that have lived in this town for 10, 15 years that maybe aren't on the same page that the rest of us are.
So what's your point?
We're
No,
trying.
just kidding.
That's it. That's it.
Got it.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming out.
Sure.
When's your next meeting?
December 12th, something like that. Wednesday.
Okay.
Second Wednesday.
Second Wednesday.
Would you
At
like
the
to say-
Ainsworth House.
Yeah. Would you like to? Okay.
Well, it's kind of interesting. They talk loud enough, you don't need to hear that.
Not unless you have a voice like Carrie's like mine.
I'll upgrade you on the park, I don't know about the park. But we're going to have a meeting 17th of November, and DOT's coming to enlighten us about the turn lane. They're going to change it from 4 lanes to 3 lanes in Kanema to eliminate
A
maybe
temple.
some of the wreck. They're going to upgrade us on that.
For those who are watching on TV, this is Howard Post of Kanema
Oh,
neighborhood.
And secondly, we had a little run-in with Metro again. A couple of years ago, they come in and did all this plan and went in and cut 120 trees, which really pissed people off, to say the least. We were promised it would never happen again. The only thing that saved this second development is the biologist mentioned to my wife the other night they were going to cut 220 trees. Well, we're right back to Plan 2, so we called a couple of the councilors, and in their decision, they decided to postpone this for a year while they rethink about it. Because it involves the cemetery road and cutting trees and building new roads. And they're bringing in a way bigger plan than they're telling us about. So that's our concern. So Brian's also going to come to our meeting Thursday night and kind of smooth the feathers.
Who?
Brian, his name?
Vaughn.
Brian Vaughn. He's a biologist for Metro.
Responsible for the area.
Yeah, he's responsible for this. So. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Paul will tell you about the park, and I'm cool now.
Have you ever considered tying Paul to a tree out there?
It's hard.
Let's go over here to the Rebuckers.
We're the Rickenbachs from South End Neighborhood Association, and we are having a meeting on the 17th, and we're having the tree presentation done. I know that one of the things that they have brought up in our neighborhood that they're concerned about, or that has been voiced on Warner Mill, and that's not in our neighborhood, but where they've restriped as you go to Beaver Creek Road, there are some older people who come visit people in our neighborhood, and when they go down that intersection going towards the new Safeway to turn right onto Beaver Creek, they hit the sidewalk because they can't tell where it juts in, and they were wondering if it's possible to have that painted. Does that make any sense? They've done now that they've done the new striping on that, you can tell where the lane, where the striping stops.
What direction are you going on?
If you're going from Mount Pleasant to Safeway.
Okay.
So you're going east.
On Beaver Creek.
And then you turn right onto Beaver Creek. It's where it goes from one lane to two lanes with the turn lane, and there's an angle on the sidewalk where they cut out the turn lane. People are hitting that in the dark. And so they were wondering if there was some way to put reflective paint to show where
the curb is.
The curb is. So that's a concern.
Can take a look at that.
Okay.
Okay. Next. Park Place Neighborhood is having a steering committee meeting on November 21st at 7 p.m. at the Red Community Building. Not sure that there's any other activities going on at this time.
Alice Watts, McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. I wanted to hand out some money tonight. But I think one person is absent. At any rate, this is in regard to the snow cone sales that we are always involved in the summer during concerts in the park. And we did solicit help from all of you. And if you did, we would give you a portion of our proceeds. So I have some money to give to 3 neighborhood associations. I will mail the one that's missing, which is Barkley Hills. I don't think there's anyone here tonight from Barkley Hills. Okay. I have a check for Hillendale, and I don't know you, but you're from Hillendale, and you're one of the co-chairs, so I'd like to give it to you, if that's all right. And then my other one is for Park Place, and since Steve's sitting right here, I'll give it to him.
Thank you.
And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your help. And
Need to show up.
Yeah. We'd like to invite you to help us again next year, and it will mean money in your coffers.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul, you've got 30 minutes. 30 seconds.
Our Kanema Park, Children's Park product is really starting to come together. Right now they're finishing putting in all the pad and the infrastructure for the restroom, and the grass is starting to come up, and as soon as we get the engineered chips into around the playground equipment, we'll have a functioning playground equipment area, so it's going to be very exciting. I have also here some information that's I think is very important, and I think why it's important is it should go out into every one of the neighborhood associations and be realized as an opportunity. We have, in this day and age, a lot of underemployed, unemployed, and low-income families that are really hurting. And the city has a policy on low-income families and a matrix based upon the state poverty schedule. And if people qualify and they fill out and send in an application, this application then could allow them to receive almost a 50% reduction in city utility fees and costs. And this could be a big thing, particularly if you've got a low-income family, maybe it's a single mother with multiple kids, and she's having trouble just putting food on top of the table for kids. Or you got a senior who's trying to age in place on a fixed income, and they're having trouble making their utility bills. But when we got to this area, like on preventive maintenance for utility fee for roads, in July 2012,
the fee is going to come in on the water bill is going to be $11.22. But if they qualify and put in this application, these people could have a $5.25 fee. So that's a big deal. But at the same time, if you get into certain things like when the stormwater fee is $8, it becomes $4.15. Or if you get the sewer rate and it's $31.65, it could be, if you're low income, $15.83. And if you're the average water bill customer here, there's a water bill of fixed rate, and then there's a metered rate, which is based upon 100 cubic feet of usage. But in average, you'll see a water bill that could be $30, $35 reduced to $15. And this can be all very, very important. And what's important in this time and in very terrible economic conditions, that we get this information out into the neighborhoods so that you can be an advocate keeping people, keeping a roof over their head and food on the table when they really have a need for it. And so I hope that what I'll do is I'll send an email to Chris, and she can then broadcast it out to everyone so that you can recreate these forms and applications. But I think that this is something important for us to really literally take out one-on-one within our neighborhoods. When we see families that are in crisis and we can help them, this could be a very important opportunity for us to help our community.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. It's very important.
Now it's time for Kathy. Fill my glass, fill my heart. No.
Oh, I'll fill your heart. I'll tickle your fancy. Hazel Grove Wrestling Farm has a meeting with South End on November 17th, and Phyllis Stock and Field of Heart has drop boxes out, and we're getting orders. We have orders filled. I've been working Wednesdays and Fridays and Wednesday, and I will be going to the chamber with our chairperson, Willie, to show. They have for the charity, the GMOC is going to give all the charities around a table, and so Phyllis Stocking is going to show what we put in the socks, and that'll give you a clue how much a sock will cost.
I take it there's a side conversation going on next to you.
I don't pay any attention to them. But so we are going to probably be in need. We did 3,000 socks last year.
Okay.
So
thank you.
And that was a 300 increase of people that needed something. So
Tom.
Pardon me. Yes, Hazel Grove Wrestling Farms neighborhood. The thing I would like to report is that recently the South End Neighborhood Executive Committee invited Kathy and I to attend one of their executive sessions, and at that session they determined that they, going forward, starting next year, are going to hold their meetings only 4 times a year, and we did not go along with that insofar as Hazel Grove Wrestling Farms, so it looks like our meeting schedules will vary from one another. We are going to continue on
Who's going to go to 4? Sorry, I missed that.
A 5 meeting a year plan. So
The South
End.
We're going to vote on that with our bylaw presentation
Right.
in January.
At this point are holding your meetings together and you're doing
yeah,
separate.
and
we may go end up separating.
Okay. Larry.
Caulfield neighborhood had their new elections. I'm still the chairman. They didn't try to impeach me. Gary Davis is the secretary treasurer, and Mark Merblestein is the vice chairman. We are working close with the police department school to see if we can get a handle on the traffic around the school building, because we had a tremendous outrage from the neighbors that I wasn't even aware of. They got away from our house because people complained too much, but they went down the hill, and the police are doing a very good job on that. And that's all I have.
Okay. Just a quick thank you to all the citizens of Oregon City and their families who supported the pumpkin patch out at Sears Farm, the Century Farm. We actually had Channel 12 come out and film Good Day Oregon from there, 6 segments last Tuesday, the 25th. So there were some good points, some bad points, but it was a good learning experience for all those involved in it. William.
Just one thing briefly, that just sort of as a public announcement, that if you weren't aware, that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. over at the Pioneer Center, Clackamas County Tax Assessor is holding a town hall meeting. So if you want to find out about what's going on in Taxville, stop by the Pioneer Center at 7 p.m. tomorrow night.
Nancy?
Okay, I just wanted to mention a couple things that might help the discussion that occurred earlier about Leland Road and Main Street. Main Street is funded 90% with either state or federal funding. There's very little local funding in that project. And then, so maybe that would help a little bit about why are we spending millions on Main Street and not on Leland Road. On Leland Road, we had enough money to do the paving, which was in dire need of, and we tried to maximize out as far as we possibly could to get some better bike lane. It's basically a shoulder. But I would like you to just think about if we went ahead and widened Leland Road to include sidewalks on both sides and perhaps even planter strips. Some of the edge of the roadway and the edge of the sidewalk would be very, very close to some people's homes. Mm-hmm. And it would have required that we purchase right-of-way up and down both sides, which is millions of dollars. So it's really complicated. We would have loved to have done even more with Leland. We did as much as we possibly could with our local funding. So we are trying, but that road is going to be tough to get sidewalks on both sides. And
How about one side?
I mean, even think about it. Look at the edges next time, and look at where the doorways are, and maybe that'll help understand a little bit more.
Nancy, I wasn't.
Yeah, don't be defensive.
I wasn't trying to.
Oh, I was just trying to explain.
But I think one of the things was Michael mentioned that there's a large perception problem, a PR problem, I guess, as you would put it, and I don't really. Do you realize how widespread and how bad that perception problem is within the city?
For the pavement, or for everything?
Within just
specifically,
people see things. You know, they saw all of the Leland construction go on last year, and there are like 5 pieces of property there that still have open ditches on both sides of the road that you can't walk down them without being there. I understand that you can't acquire the property. I understand the money.
Yep.
I didn't personally know that the Main Street was funded differently than the rest of it. So, you know, I didn't know that, so my neighbors wouldn't know that. I can't tell them, explain that it's funded differently.
Right.
So, I think that the fact that the people don't really know, they just see one thing, they see another thing, and they're
Concerned.
upset.
Yeah. I just wanted to put some explanation behind it. Maybe that helps a couple, maybe 2 more people know more about it. And then a reminder on the earthquake thing, there's a change in the location, and even just the other night, Alice pulled out her flyer, and it said it was at the Oregon City High School auditorium, the old high school. So it is at Providence Willamette Falls Education Center down at 15th and Washington Street.
But there are signs out if people would read them. You have
Yes.
very good
People
signs.
don't always read
You've done
signs.
very good.
That was our effort to get the word out.
Well, I got those flyers here at this meeting.
Oh, yeah, but they put it
In closing, I just simply wanted to say, there's a lot of people who volunteer. All the people who serve on their neighborhood associations volunteer on this, but also we'd like to thank the city staff who spends their time coming to these meetings in the evenings. And hidden away from all this is Melody Ashford of the Willamette Falls Media Center. She's back in here filming this. And normally she goes to about 9, and when we go over, it means that she's missing some fun time at home. So just wanted to give
the cameras off at 9 o'clock.
Did they shut them up at 9? I just wanted to say thank you to Melody for her efforts in that. So thank you all for all your volunteer time.
Yay.
The meeting is closed. Is it cut off, Melody? No, she's in there.
Oh, yeah, she's
She's there.
No, she's